Hello there and welcome to another Glyphs screencast tutorial for YSTN 3003 typeface design. In this screencast I'm going to do a really quick one that's going to talk about dealing with a interpolation space and some techniques we can use in Glyphs to work with a two-master setup, let's say for weight or width or optical size, in a way that you can get away without using many masters in your setup. So we know that drawing a lot of masters, as you saw, like for instance in this typeface that I'm developing right now, it closed down the masters unfortunately, but you notice I've got a lot of masters that I'm working on here. Really bold, condensed, very wide. So I've got a lot of masters that I'm working on, and that can be quite a lot of drawing time. I'm doing that for this typeface on purpose because I want the control at these different spots in the design space, and I think that I kind of need them, especially because I'm going to such an extreme weight variation, and I'm going to pretty large variation in width as well. However, in this typeface right here, we're going to try working with a setup where we get rid of the regular master, so the in-between, and we're going to use that that bracket layer trick, where we don't actually have to work with two masters. So remember, if you check the video on glyph substitutions, you'll have seen that I used a technique to actually switch between two different versions of a capital letter Q, which can be very helpful to dealing with complex or more complex characters in the counterform areas and freeing them up so that they behave in a better way at, let's say, a bolder end of the design space, or in the middle of the design space, or at the light area of the design space. What we're going to use that same technique for today in this video is we're going to use that technique to create a better interpolation between very light and bold. So we need to have the same setup, but in this one you don't have to have alternate glyphs drawn. You just need to have your very light master and your bold master. What we need to do though is to copy these layers. So I need to go and call this one thin. I don't even have to actually name this the same, but I will. And sorry, brackets, you don't have to hold down shift. And I remember that from our multiple master video, interpolation video, we had the regular weight set at about 500. And I'm going to copy this one and call it ultra bold, and I'm going to give it a value of 500 as well. Okay, now if you remember, or if you do check the G-sub video, what you need to do is inside this layer, or in this layer, you need to have the alternate version of a particular glyph drawn so that it will interpolate in a certain way. And you can always also do this tutorial on Glyphs, app.com by Rainer Scheichelbauer. He has a great one on alternating glyph shapes. This is where I learned how to operate this in Glyphs. So inside this tutorial, essentially what you see in Reiner's diagram is that you might have a letter E that you don't like the interpolation of what happens in the raw interpolation of the crossbar of this E. It gets not very nice, especially right in around this area of the space. It would be much better if it behaved this way. So what you want is you want the swap to happen somewhere in here. And what you really need to have then is you need to have a different version of E drawn as a copy of the bold version so that it will allow for a swap to happen right around there where you want it. So what you're going to do is you're going to leave this thin layer the same because we want this to be monolinear, but the issue that I'm having right now is that in the middle of the space, I don't like how thin this gets. I want this to look more like a monolinear kind of sans serif design, but I don't want it to look like this inside this part of the space. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the thin design alone, but in the bold version, I'm going to grab it here, and I'm going to copy it into this, which, sorry, it's already a copy in there. And we can do two things. We could edit this side of the design space, or I could edit this side, and what I want to do, in fact, what I could do, let's just see what happens when we affect this and we apply this to the continuous space. Now notice what's happening in here. Okay, this is a good example of the bracket layer and what it's doing. Okay, sorry. Okay, look at what's happening right now. The only letters that are affected are these three because they're after 500. Remember, if we go back into our masters, between 200 and 900, and remember we have instances in here as well, which is actually kind of influencing what's going on because basically after 500, which is actually after this one, it's influencing the design space. Even this one is at 550. That's influencing the design space there. But what I could also do then with my two master setup is I could say, all right, well, I actually want this to flip earlier. I want it to flip around 300 because I want it to affect the earlier part of the design space. So if I do that, then if I go back to this layer and I move this, now it's influencing this side of the design space. Like that. Now this is just with, this isn't with multiple master interpolation, this was with the instance-based interpolation, but what I'm really concerned about is not seeing the instances. I'm going to actually get rid of the instances. What I care about the most is seeing what happens if I was to run OTvar player, and I want to know actually what's happening then inside this space. So when it's a continuum, because that's how a variable font will ultimately operate. It will have instances that are exported, which will show up appropriately, but I do care about how it's behaving inside a continuum because that's also part of what I'm doing. It just helps when you have the instances to test. Well, why can't we see? There we go. It helps when you have all the instances and you can test them at the same time. Okay. Oops. So then if we look back in here, what we want then is we want some kind of a flip to happen here that will influence this part of the design space. So what I would do then is I'm going to actually draw this end to look in a way that makes this part of the design space look nice in the interpolation. So let's say, is this going to make it look nice in the interpolation space? And we can only really tell that once again if we go back, run that player. That's better. And right now it's not making a flip yet, or it's making a flip too early. So I'm going to throw this at 500 for now, or actually let's do 600. I want it to occur later. And see, now that flip is happening. You can just see it right here. It needs to actually occur a lot later. So let's throw that flip then around 800. Oops, sorry. Of course I'm a butterfingers when I'm recording. All right. So, much better. So now see what's happening. We get that really nice bold design that we wanted. In fact, it should flip earlier. Let's look at it. I would prefer if it flipped. Okay, so this is still not exactly what I want. I think that this is a little too light there. However, the flip that I want to happen though, that's looking pretty good. I would prefer actually the flip to happen sooner than that. So I'm gonna, and the way that I can also think about this is in my masters. This is 900. It's happening pretty late. And 200. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that flip to happen around 700 instead. And I think for the sake of demo in this video, it's going to work pretty well. The flip happens. Yeah, that's better. So see the flip happening here, that makes a much better N. At least based on the design I have, because remember I keep saying here, I don't like how it's not getting thin in that one spot, and you know what, I'm going to leave this open for now. What I don't like is how thin it still is in the medium spot, which is somewhere around here. Like not a big fan of how it's just a little too thin. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually try dropping this down. Okay, and now how does that influence this side of the master? Because in these very lightweights, you don't want it to get, let's see. I don't want it to get so light and thin in here, not quite that quickly. I'm doing a kind of weird thing here. All right. That's much better. See, I want it to be smoother, more monolinear, then it starts to slowly shift, and then when it gets away out here, you want it to snap. I'm actually going to get it to snap earlier now because I made that modification. So let's quickly go. What if I get it to switch at 600? Now let's see, it's going to change there. Yeah, I would actually switch it earlier now. Let's try 500. That's around where the medium weight would generally be. And let's see how that works. A little too early. So once again, you see this is a kind of an inherent methodology, or part of a methodology in type design, is that there's a lot of trial and error involved because you're testing a product that's going to be used by a lot of people. It takes time to test. Very similar, type design, very similar to industrial design, very similar to product design, which is industrial design really. See this flip? That's a lot better. And then if I was in a continuous design space, yeah, that would be better. And then I could modify this so that it would work, you know, even more seamlessly. If you look in the center, I don't like this. I would probably get it to flip maybe at 560 or something, but we don't need to do that for today. So enjoy.